Hey guys, your IT job coach here. It has been a while since I put a video. I've been spending my time doing a lot of crazy things in the industry. Um, there's been a lot of changes. The job requirements are continuously shifting. Current metrics are showing that in by 2025, 40% of our skill sets will have completely changed, which means continuous education, continuous training, getting the right skills. So one of the things that I get a lot of questions about is understanding the overall IT landscape. So you get a job into cloud, into cybersecurity, or whatever it is, and then you get stuck in not knowing enough about everything else that's going on. So I'm going to do a couple of videos just to help everybody out on explaining the landscape. One of the big ones for this video is something I was working with Toronto Metropolitan University. I did a seminar for them in one of their cybersecurity programs. It's about backup recovery. So being able to recover your systems during cyber attacks or even ongoing IT compliance and governance reasons. So for a lot of you that maybe have done some cloud certifications or basic CompTIA training, you know backups are required, but you don't really understand this sort of landscape or why it's required, how it's actually done in a larger organization. So I hope this video gives you a bit of an understanding. With the permission of Toronto Metropolitan University, I was allowed to release this to the public. I have blocked off some of the videos, obviously, to keep confidentiality of people's names, etc. So enjoy the video. I hope it helps you in your IT journey, and I'll see you soon. So welcome everyone. So as Juliana said, I run the data protection solutions team across Canada for Dell Technologies. And just a bit of background of who I am. I've been doing IT for 20 years. I came from an operations background in one of Canada's largest ISPs. I've done architecture jobs, and then I stepped into a management job. I work at Dell Technologies to offer solutions to help protect organizations. So the good news is, I know a lot about what's going on in the, sorry, is there a question there? Oh, I'll explain how I do this later on. So I have a lot of certifications. I'm Unix certified, Microsoft certified, Cisco certified. Through my 20 years, I've done a lot of this stuff. I'm cloud certified. So there's a lot of stuff that I know. I apply in my day-to-day job across my teams. And when I work with companies, we help look through their systems to make sure that they are secure. I am super passionate about helping people as well. So I'm going to give you some contacts later on at the end, so you can follow me or ask me questions if you're moving up in your career or just require some advice. I'm happy to help out. So just an introduction agenda, what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to talk about data protection matters for cybersecurity. This is talking about backing up your systems. I'm going to be also talking about why people are doing data protection, what's the business drivers around it, what are the big problems about it, and how we as Dell Technologies actually goes about solving some of these problems. And then in the cyber recovery landscape, we know, you guys are in the cyber recovery course, you know why it's causing so much havoc across Canada and the world. I'm going to talk about some key requirements we look at when we solve cyber recovery issues to make sure companies can survive from a cyber attack. I'm going to talk about how to implement it and give you guys some next steps. So why data protection matters for cybersecurity? At the end of the day, really, we talk about business. Businesses are getting attacked every day. So in 2020, I love this website. If you guys want to start following it, it's called blackfog.com. It's on the bottom corner here. You guys can take a screenshot of this. This is just worldwide, some of the companies that have registered cyber attacks. It happens about 11 seconds. If we have to fill up a slide with all the logos, basically it'll be very, very tiny. You won't even see it. They're getting attacked significantly. And it's causing lots of impacts. What we see today is ransomware is one of the big attackers. it causes a lot of outages and the demand to pay some ransom. I believe last year the average price was about 750,000. This year they raised their prices. I guess inflation is hitting the market, so they're actually asking for 1.85 million on average for the recovery of their data. And what we've seen in that is that some of these companies can't afford that, and this is the Canadian version of those logo slides listed from that company. So you can see it's happening everywhere. And when you pay that ransom, only about 8% of companies recover all their data. So that is significant. And we're seeing that as of 2015 to this year, it's going to be a $6 trillion impact to the world. So it is rather significant. Everybody, when we go talk to CIOs across Canada, it is within their top 3 requirements to protect against ransomware. So you guys are in a good spot with going into this Ryerson course to be able to get into a market that's exploding and requires a lot of skill sets. So you guys are on a very good path there. I'm going to talk about some of the bigger impacts. The one that the industry talks a lot about is Sony Pictures. So if you guys aren't familiar with Sony Pictures, this happened quite a few years ago. And it was so severe that they went back, all their IT systems got impacted to the point that they had to start paying their employees back to actual handwriting checks. That was how severe the impacts was. So what happened was that the hackers got in, they spent about 6 to 9 months mapping out the whole IT infrastructure. And from that, they had an attack plan. They had more documentation on the environment than the people working there. So they spent a whole percentage of their time just auditing, just documenting, just writing down the environments, drawing it out, and actually having a whole plan. They actually went and encrypted the backups so they couldn't attack. They couldn't restore when the attack happened. What that means is, let's say I broke your system and then I broke your ability to recover, you're really being held for ransom at that point. So they did this not to hold for money. They did this more of a political statement. We believe it had to do with a certain movie they launched at that point about some Asian dictator, and that caused a direct attack at them. In fact, we also see a lot of people saying, oh, I'm not worried about cyber attacks because I just upgraded to this software. And within 24 hours, that company went down. So don't offer challenges in case you guys ever get into one of those jobs and you're very social out there. You know, watch out for what you say. It does have repercussions back to you and to your organization. So what is a proper data protection strategy and what's the drivers around it? When we look at cyber protection, really data protection, it starts with backup. Backups include backing up your ERP systems, your CRM, which is really the stuff that handles the supply management across your organization, the customer management. So that's the CRM, customer technologies out there that maintain databases of your customers, your databases, your file servers. So all the documents like this PowerPoint that you create goes on a NAS drive, and that has to be backed up to make sure that in case the system breaks, that you could recover and you could continue doing what you do. So backup is really important for that. There's also an explosion into cloud-based services, VMware virtualization, VMware Tanzu, if you guys are familiar, and containers with Kubernetes, and then moving a lot of our services that are typically in-house into the cloud. So what that means is that not only are you managing systems, but you're also managing relationships with cloud providers and making sure your access to the cloud providers are working and you have a copy, because what happens if someone has your master account password into a cloud service provider and erases everything? So a lot of this falls into 3 drivers. There's this business continuity and DR. And this is really keeping copies around for 2 to 4 weeks so you can recover your business in case there's any impacts. With a lot of these systems, and not all of them, there is a requirement for legal and compliance governance that your security team or your audit team, maybe it's a health insurance company that requires an audit trail of everything for up to 7 years or even longer. So there's a legal requirement for you guys to have those backups around. And then finally, the business requirements. When you create a service, think about the Amazon website you go to do purchasing. Well, if that thing goes down, you're losing money every second. if you lose your payroll, you lose the ability. So you have a shorter, you could stand a few minutes, but you can't stand days and days without having a payroll system. So there's different types of requirements for keeping your systems online. So that's the RPO and RTO, the time to recover a system and how much data you can lose. And think about a bank transaction. You can't lose any one of those transactions because obviously someone who deposited $10,000, you want to make sure that they have that record in all your systems. You can't lose that one transaction. So there's RPO points from 0 to maybe days, depending on the different business requirements out there. So all these are drivers to have a backup strategy. And normally in backup strategy, the traditional backup environment has clients, which is some of those systems that we have to back up. And then you put in an infrastructure to back it up. And that includes your master server, which is a catalog. It keeps memory of all the backups it does. It knows where the files are. It knows what and when it was backed up for compliance reasons. So that's the master. It's a master database keeping all the backups for your company. And then you have your transfer servers, which is also part of that backup technology that transfers the data from your systems into some kind of storage disk, appliance, or tape. And this has to be secure because this will be your safeguard. This will be the only way you're going to be able to recover in case your system catches on fire, lightning hits your data center, or all kinds of scenarios like someone breaking in and destroying your regular systems on the top. So when you look at it, backup is actually super expensive. It's necessary, but it's also one of the worst nightmares of any organization because they have to pay a lot of cost to maintain backups. Just for an example of 1 terabyte of servers, you're going to do your one backup, which is a full copy, and then in file, you're able to do incrementals. So just the files that have changed. So if you do 24 dailies, which is a month's worth, you basically have 24 days. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you do a full on Sunday, you do another week, and you do another full, etc. So you're actually keeping for 1 terabyte, you're keeping about 23 copies of full data replicas of your production copy, plus 24 incrementals. On a databases, some of the technologies aren't great about doing incrementals, and what you have to do is you have to do fulls. So for 1 terabyte of database, you actually have to do 47 terabytes of fulls. So think about deploying 1 terabyte of disk at home, and you have to keep 47 terabytes just for compliance, which is a crazy cost for an organization, and it hurts the profitability, it hurts the maintenance, but it's also super required for compliance and for disaster recovery and to continue the business. So what do we do at Dell Technologies? One thing we do is called global deduplication. It means, and think of these colored blocks as unique ones and zeros. When it comes in through our infrastructure, it actually globally dedupes everything. So it not only dedupes, but it compresses it. So 1011, if I'm backing it up from, let's say, 1 file server or 1 VM, if I see it somewhere else, you don't have to even send it to me because I know about it. All I have to do is keep memory that that person has a copy of it too. So this is awesome because what we do is we reduce the cost of all those backups. And just to give you an example of the one we're familiar with, we could take that 1 terabyte, which is equal to this 25.4 terabytes with all the copies, and shrink it down to under 0.8 terabytes, which is, we reduce the cost significantly to maintain your backups. And it's great also for the databases, as you can see from here as well. So that technology is awesome. We reduce the cost of all the disk, but do we do anything for the speed? Yes, we do. And this is called Boost. Boost is bandwidth optimized backup. And in a traditional sense, when you do a backup, you send 1 terabyte every night, and that can take a long time. With Boost, we used our deduplication, and we created a driver that allows us to figure out what to send and what not to send before. So it basically dedupes at the client and not have to send it over the network. This means it's going to be a faster backup. And also when you store it, it's going to be stored more efficiently because there's not a lot of work afterwards. It's all done before it's even sent in a wire. So instead of sending 1 terabyte, I'm sending maybe 20 megabytes to back up the same 20 terabytes. or sorry, the same 1 terabyte because I've seen it somewhere before. So with that, I'm able to back up super fast. And for businesses that require very little downtime and to be able to back it up multiple times a day, this allows me to go in and do that backup without impacting any of the systems. So what do we work with? Obviously, we work with a lot of industry backup applications, but we also integrate with a lot of the services out there, like the SAPs, the Oracles, and all these systems. When you guys get into organizations, you're going to be very, very familiar with. These are the systems that are keeping the lights on. Some of them are the customer CRM systems that we talked about. Some of them are the back-end provisioning systems. Some of them are the large analytic systems in there. And we have plugins to a lot of this to allow us to boost that backup directly to our appliance. Now, the last thing is, yeah, I see the benefits of all this, but what's the risk? So if you think about those colored blocks before, those compressed colored blocks we looked at, what happens if we lose one of them? So think about having a dictionary and you dedupe everything into the letters A to Z. And if you lose the letter E, that dictionary is completely useless because at the end of the day, there's so much that relies on that one little block in a dedupe file system that if you lose one or you corrupt it, you're going to be in a lot of danger. That means every backup for your 7 years is gone. So when we built our appliance to do dedupe, we built it from the ground up. That means our engineering principles is number one, to keep the data safe no matter what. So what it does is it stores everything in a metadata hash. It has a patented technology for us to be able to do this, which is a differentiator from anybody else in the market that allows us to back it up in a very efficient way. So when we read the data, it actually scans it. It runs through a hash to make sure, and it says, hey, did you send me 1011? And it does a handshake to make sure that that's correct. It writes it to disk, and then it reads it back to make sure that hash is the same, so we don't corrupt it on the way to disk. And then when it's on the disk, it always checks that data to make sure that nothing changes on it. We don't overwrite those blocks. We want to make sure that that 1011 is always protected. And if anything gets corrupted, if something seems fishy, we actually repair it with all the metadata that we have in the box. So it's a complete self-contained, self-healing technology we have to be able to protect and safeguard everybody's data. So this is why when you walk into if there's 10 companies in Canada and you walk into some of them, they're running our stuff. They're keeping our data secure using our Power Protect data domain system. It's run by 90% of the Fortune 100 companies. And some of the big differentiators is this global dedupe that we have. A lot of people are trying to apply this by creating a database to keep track of all the blocks. But as we know, databases get corrupted. And it's architecture friendly, which means we reduce a lot of those transfer servers that we saw before by sending data with Boost technology directly from the clients all the way to a backup storage without having to go through servers, which adds time and delay. And finally, our DIA, which is our disaster vulnerability architecture, which keeps all those blocks unique. Now I'm going to talk about why this all matters in cybersecurity. So that was a 101 of backup. I hope it makes some sense for a lot of you if you're not familiar with backups in organizations. Now we're going to talk about cyber recovery and what are all the key requirements. So this slide is very, very interesting, and I'm going to be blocking some of the text. I'll try to move this way out of the way so you guys can get a good, better view of the corner. But what we see is, on average, hackers, cyber attackers, whatever you want to call them, they're in your organization unknown to you for about 170 days on average. And this is getting worse because with all the new technologies we talked about, like Kubernetes, like containers, cloud services, now every CIO is forced with redundancy to create multi-cloud strategies. So they don't just use AWS, they have to use AWS and Azure or Google and Azure or any combination to have more failover redundancy in their supply to create IT services. They're lacking a lot of control because they're being pushed into all these unknown technologies and they don't have the skill sets, which is why you guys are in this course today. to start learning about these to help these organizations. We have a big deficit of IT skills happening in the market. Also with cloud and mobile and Internet of Things, we're having smart sensors all the way down to hydroelectric dams, into cars, into refrigerators. It all gives access to people to break in and do funny things. And we've seen in one of my customers, we were talking, and they said they actually were able to mimic an attack by going into a big turbine through a very secure connection and opening and closing the motor in such sequence that it actually broke that electric generator. So by doing something like this, think about Ontario Power or Hydro One or any of these large electric companies out there providing electricity. If you break one turbine, sure, it might impact a small group, but the time to replace a turbine is going to be months or even a year for all that specialized equipment. Now, if they consolidate an attack and they do it across all of them at once, think about the havoc that it's going to cause that country for having no power for a year. So the impacts are crazy. The requirements of this is they have to have a framework to go around and a reaction mechanism. So within a 28-day average is once you detect something has happened, companies on average take about 28 days to go in and repair their organization and bring it back up. And that's assuming it's something easy, commodity like a server that they could bring in and they could repair. They have to go through, look at the business impacts, prioritize what to bring up, and then create a recovery plan across it. So for a cyber recovery resiliency plan, you always have to have some kind of framework in place to make sure who gets contacted, what systems are prioritized for recovery, and how to recover and who to go to on the recovery. So all this stuff has to be planned out in a very nice controlled process, and it needs to be evaluated consistently and updated with the organization as it changes and shifts. This all includes inventories of your key applications and lots of extra procedures like that. And this is really what the role of a cybersecurity solution does. So when we look at our backups, what are the potential impacts? Obviously, they want to attack our systems, which means they want to go into our source, which is the applications itself, the source data. They want to destroy it, make it inaccessible. They want to encrypt it or disable it in some manner. I've seen some really good attacks being in a backup team, being in a recovery team. I've seen the support calls of how people are getting attacked from them logging in and to your key systems like your storage array and rechanging the boot up code so the disk gets corrupted on boot up. They're very advanced. They're not these going in and hitting a delete key or running a little script. They're actually very, very organized, and it keeps shifting and basically evolving as technology gets more and more online. Then on the master server, I've seen all kinds of crazy attacks because not only do we sell technologies like this, but we also store any type of data coming from systems like this. So we get called into a lot of support issues when these systems get attacked as well. And there's a lot of vulnerabilities, meaning they could go through the OS. And when you're in an OS, like think about Windows and you see a network drive, you just go into the network drive and you hit delete. It's not even about the backup software. You could go via the OS to go erase all the files. Then you could go into the master server and look at your big catalog, that list of all your backups, and just hold shift, expire. And every one of your backups in your organization gets expired. And people actually keep 2 copies of their backups. So if you're the 47 copies we talked about, you keep it on site A and site B in case site A gets destroyed. Then you have a DR copy. It's called what happens when disaster hits site 1. You can recover your DR site. But that DR site is controlled by the same master server. So when you erase something on the left, it's going to erase it on the right as well. So that's not good. Then also, there's also what I've seen recently is NTP attacks. If you guys aren't familiar with NTP, it's basically, think of it as the master watch, the master clock that's in your organization. And what happens with that is it keeps everybody in sync with the exact time, which is very, very important for IT systems to talk to each other. You want the logs and everything and the transactions to all sync up. So there's a master clock. So they hack into the master clock and they say, you know what? It is 2028. So what that does is throughout the whole organization, it tells everybody that's 2028, and your backup servers go, oh, my 7-year backups, it's time to erase all those. So that's called an NTP injection attack as well. So there's all kinds of ways to attack that. And then obviously the storage itself, they could get into it, erase the files, or try to overwrite it in some manner as well. So what do we have to do? And if you keep up, I think one of the main things, and I'll talk about this in the next steps, is for anyone going into a cybersecurity sort of profession, to keep tabs on government documentation, especially from the US. Canada itself typically follows the trends of US and stuff like GDPR, and we always follow those processes to a T, sometimes a year or two behind. So whatever they're doing, it's a great indicator of what you have to be preparing yourself for. So when you look at this, they're basically saying in some of these documentations, the best way to secure and make sure your appliance or whatever it is, your data is safe, is to pull the plug, don't have it online. Whenever you put it online, it's not how it's going to be attacked, it's actually if it's going to be attacked, it's when it's going to be attacked. Because as long as it's reaching the internet, someone's going to find a way in. So the best way to protect it and to protect a cyber recovery solution is to make sure it's offline. It's off the grid. No one knows about it. So there are 3 I's of modern cyber recovery. And this is part of the test we're going to have later on. So you guys are taking notes. The first I is called isolated. It means keeping it off the grid. That's the first driving principle of creating a cyber recovery solution. The second one is immutability, which means think of a CD-ROM. Okay, you write it to a CD and you can't erase it. It's called write once, read many. It's called WORM for an acronym. You'll hear this a lot going forward in IT. WORM allows you to write it once, and then it keeps a track of what that copy should be, and it doesn't alter it anymore. That's the other only way. So when people come in, they can't encrypt it. When they encrypt it, it's actually a separate copy. Your original always stays the same. Number 3 is to have intelligence and deep analysis to evolve with technology that allows it to understand when an attack actually happens and to be able to repair from it. So with that, the 3 steps, it all leads up to the ability to recover. So without the first 3, you will never know if you have a good copy to recover from. You will never know if that one piece of data that comes from your backup has been corrupted. When, well, they've been in my network for 6 months. Is it going to be good when I recover it? Or am I just restoring something that's going to break 5 seconds later because or am I exploding the solution now because I have a safe zone? I'm going to restore my backups there, but I'm actually injecting my virus into that environment. So there's a lot of that risk as well. So our solution goes into all 3 of these I's to give you a way to recover and know a good copy to recover to. So how do you implement the cyber recovery strategy? Number 1 is you don't put it online. And what that means is, let's say you have your production systems and then you have your backup, to open an air gap, create an air gap into your network. And with all the automation and everything like this, you could actually really do this creatively. Create a gap that connects the network only in times that once the backup is done, that it creates a temporal connection to do a sync. And it's a one-way sync, which means that people can't go in with any other protocols or connections or any other attempts. And it creates that gap for it to quickly send the data, cut it off right away, and there's no other way back in. And then when it gets in, put that compliance level lock into it to make sure that whatever is being written is tagged with that CD image. It's a gold copy, we know it's good. And we have to follow all the standards outlined by the industry to make sure that that data is actually good. And there's a lot of standards. Thankfully, I don't have to read any of them because if you want to go to sleep, it's a great way to read about the standards. And finally, to have predictive analytics. So proactively analyze your solutions, making sure that the data is found before the attack even happens, and to be able to really do that smartly and evolve. So how do we apply Dell technology solutions into a cyber vault? Number one, our boost. So we talked about our boost technologies, how it sends very little data, it sends it faster. By using boost to do our cyber vault, this allows this air gap to be online for short periods of time. It takes what normally takes from hours, we reduce it to minutes or maybe at most half an hour to sync your prioritized systems into the cyber vault. Now, very quickly, we open it, we shut it down, and there's no other way in. With our DIA architecture, we create something called a zero-sum fast copy, which is a gold copy without impacting all the other dedupe blocks. So because of how our dedupe works, we can create images without actually impacting the source data. And then we have an ability called retention lock, which means we put a key onto every one of those global dedupe blocks that makes it uncorruptible. And if you want to actually erase it, the time, the internal hardware has to reach 7 years. So we can't have an NTP spoof. We have actual hardware to make sure that it actually counts down to 7 years when you set a retention lock for 7 years. Or you need a CISO plus your CEO to log in at the same time to erase data. So multi-person attacks that needs to be set up on day one, and those are all features you can enable or disable when you set it up. So all this allows us to have one of the industry's most secure cyber recovery vaults in the market. And this thing has been one of those it has gone from very little, oh, I don't need it, to I need it tomorrow. And in Canada, the attacks have been actually getting more and more. It's been about 30% more than last year. That's what I've seen. The quantities to the smaller organizations have decreased, but the ones to the large organizations have actually increased from our calls, from our support calls, etc. So the chances of them already being in a lot of the organizations that we use today for our services is actually pretty high. And the chances of them actually getting impacted is actually fairly high as well. So when we do our scan, there's a lot of extra features we do and a lot of industry standards that other people have started implementing in their cyber vaults. Number one is to do an initial scan to figure out a confidence level. Then we ongoingly check every other backup that comes in for any changes. And then we do forensic reporting back to actually identify what files were actually impacted. And I'm going to talk about this a bit more detail before I go on to the next steps. So first, when it comes in, we use a technology called CyberSense to scan through all the files and backups in there to create sort of a good copy, to know what good is and normal it's supposed to look like. Then we apply analytics, and there's a lot of smart people that figure out 28 types of attack vectors that they could hit a file on, and they look for those types of changes. And then there's also about 100 stats to apply to it to see if the deviations from the source is based on actual business change or based on an attack. So this analytics engine is crazy. And then there's analysis part where it actually goes, analyzes it, and determines if an attack has happened. And it applies AI/ML learning mechanisms to determine that if this is normal or if we're deviating as well. So there's almost like a three-pronged approach that we use on our files to make sure that this is one of the strongest industry technologies to go out there to analyze if something is being hacked or being have ransomware applied to it. And then we continue this process. And when anything happens, we give a way to investigate and tag out of all your backups, which files were the safest out of everything. So when you click a single button, it restores from all your backups for the last 7 years, the ones that were meant to be virus-free based on our smart AI analytics in there. Okay, we'll talk about next steps and features. And pretty much you guys have to, there's a really good read if you guys are interested in how to harden your technology. It's called Shelter Harbor. It's created by a lot of smart architects in the US that runs banks, and lots of top organizations came together and they said, look, if we have to design something that's really hacker proof, okay, what is the framework that we have to work around? So our technology is certified to run in a sheltered harbor. I believe we are the only technology right now that's allowed to run in a sheltered harbor framework. If you want to see how really, really smart people are protecting their organizations, this is an excellent place to start. Gives you a very good read. It gets updated all the time, as well as following a lot of the legal and regulatory trends. This is another great way for you guys to keep up to speed on all the ongoings of cyber, how it's impacting the organizations and what the government is forcing companies to do, such as reporting all attacks to the government, etc. So all this stuff keeps changing. It's going to affect your day-to-day job, and it's a really great way for you guys to really keep in tune of where to learn and where to direct your knowledge. That being said, I'm going to open it up to questions. I also want to leave my contact information. So as Juliana said, I do help mentor a lot of people coming into IT, and I give them a lot of guidance and advice. I do have a Facebook and YouTube and a bunch of that. So if you go to this website, itjob.coach, you could find my links over there to join my Facebook and ask questions with a bunch of other community members. I think I have about 400 members in there right now. So feel free to join and reach out to me if you have questions.
Sorry, can you hear me okay now?
Perfect. Yes.
Perfect, thanks. So your presentation was just mind-blowing, outstanding. The product is, it's just awesome. My question for you, typically how long would it take for a recovery if a company was attacked and they were using your tool?
Ironically, I have just today looked at a study of this because it happened recently in Canada. Obviously, I can't state the company name, but in a normal circumstance, it would have taken them 48 days to begin a recovery. And they were able to bring the service back with our solution in about 3.5 days.
Oh.
Sorry, Dean, did I lose you there? Or
I think Dean froze. I couldn't tell who it was. I think Dean froze.
Okay.
He's so excited. He's just stuck there now.
I am.
Okay, I'm going to unmute Sadir if you want to ask your question.
Hi, Sadir, you're on mute.
Okay, let's answer a question from the chat while we wait. Regarding the backups, since they are to be kept offline, what is the cadence for performing the backups?
So the Cyber Vault is not your backup solution. It's basically a vault to restore in case of a cyber impact to the organization. You have your normal cadence of backing up to your backup data domain or whatever appliance you have today. And that is meant to do your normal day-to-day operations. The Cyber Vault is an extra add-on to just do your, we'll say, company jewels. You know, the payroll systems, the main database that keeps the lights on, all that stuff. And you go through, index it, and you say, you know what, 8% of my company, of all my IT systems, are required for instant recovery in case I get attacked. And that's what the Cyber Vault does. It keeps that backup. It trickles using Boost into an air gap into the vault of just your company jewels to make sure that you can recover in case anything happens in your normal production environment.
Awesome. Karen, go ahead.
Hi, Karen. And there you
Oh,
go.
hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I was just curious because when you recover a backup and you bring the client back online, like if the root cause hasn't been patched, like what's the chances that somebody's going to reattack them? Like how, isn't this a sort of an endless cycle?
That's an excellent question. So so we could go in and make sure that the files we give you back are safe, but if the hacker's still there, it's a matter of time before they come in again. So that extra add-on is one of the biggest challenges that companies have to go through. Do they sort of have a redundant network on the side? Sort of, let's say you have your production network and you have your fail-safe network. And when things get attacked, you hook your cyber up to the fail-safe network and rebuild from fresh. Is that possible? Then you start moving on from there. So depending on all of this, there's a cost component. There's a whole methodology and documentation of all the new systems coming online to add it and prioritize it. So this whole new community needs to be put in place in your organization to go through that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Don't know if we missed any hands up. So if you had your hand up and I missed you, please go ahead and raise it again.
And I think Chandra had a question about how I did this little head thing on the PowerPoint there. If you
Yes,
guys are
I
in
did.
Zoom, if you guys are in Zoom and you have the latest update and you go share your screen, there's a tab on the top that says basic and you can choose like which screen, and then there's advanced. If you choose PowerPoint, it actually makes it, you have the opportunity to put it as a background. So your camera is still on and it makes your PowerPoint as the background. The only negative is any of the animations. My PowerPoint is awesome. It had tons of animation in there, but I couldn't show any of it because I put it in background just to show this cool little new way of presenting.
That's awesome. Thank you.
That's super
Thanks,
cool.
Rick.
Thanks for sharing, Rick.
Andrea, go ahead. I believe you're unmuted.
Hi, Andrea.
Rick, I think you need to do some tech support.
Yep.
Okay.
It looks like you're unmuted, but maybe your speaker is not set up correctly, or under the mute button, there's a little arrow. If you click on it, just make sure it's selected on the correct mic. And if you change your mic around, sometimes that works as well.
Okay, we'll give Andrea a second to see if she can get her mic on. We have a question in the chat. Are the data sent to the backup, would they might be infected? I believe that's the
Yes.
question.
Which is why we run that AI analytics scan of all the backups. So every night, the backups still have to continue no matter what, because you can't lose any of those transactions. What we do is we apply our AI ML technologies, the 28 attack vectors, changing hashtags, encrypting, all the different ways of attacking a file, and all the 100 stats that we apply to analyze it. And then the ongoing AI ML to see if we could actually right away find out, oh my God, something happened within the last 24 hours. So your ability to know something has happened is basically goes from the 180 days down to 1 night.
Awesome. We have a question about your experience working at Dell. What is the culture like, and what are your favorite parts of working there?
So I think a lot of you are surprised. You think of Dell Technologies as the laptop, right? Nothing else. But when I started joining Dell Technologies, I worked at a company called EMC before they got acquired by Dell, and it was crazy because when I heard about Dell, I thought it was a laptop company. And then I come in, and some of the videos, if you go to Dell.ca and just look through all the videos of the corporate Dell Technologies, not just this, where you buy a laptop, but if you go into the corporate culture, we do a lot of stuff in the industry. So our vision is really to create technologies to help evolve the human race. So I've seen how we work with some of these large organizations like GE and all this stuff to work and give them IoT devices onto their fridges and have hundreds of sensors in the next F1 racing car. And I've seen one of our technologies go out to help the farms of the future. So if you think about the biggest problem is overpopulation, there's more and more people and we're running out of space. So how do you farm and create food for a growing population that's going to take up all your space? So they created a way to actually make the farmers of the future basically people walking around with smart IT devices. So we've created these farms that are put on stacks of one another, and the water that goes through actually waters each of the plants, and it recycles the water because it actually keeps everything into a big loop. So we're actually not using extra resources. We're saving about 90% of the resources to farm a piece of lettuce that would have taken, a lot more water, a lot more space, and we've shrunk that. And now there's videos of all these people going around with Dell devices on there, measuring the water quantities, all with sensors and everything. And this is really the Dell technology side that not a lot of people see, and it what really keeps me innovative, and excited to come to work every day.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick, for that insight. We have another question in the chat. To confirm, any cyber recovery process would involve at least one full restore. Is that correct?
Yes. So you always need a gold copy. And this is why a lot of technologies have to use fulls every week. It's because they store it on regular disk. And, and way back then in the past, it wasn't even disk, it was tape. And that tape, think of for you guys, I'm dating myself, those VHS tapes, and you watch it 10 times, that was great, and you put it in, and now the squiggly lines come up, and for data, that can't happen because it's going to lose your data, it's going to lose the consistency, even with all the metadata in there to try to hash and correct, what happens. Those audio tapes, those scratches when you play your cassette tapes, it always degrades over time. So they would have to create fulls all the time through their backups, like once a week, once a month, or whatever. They try to push it off because of the cost. Our benefit is that we use a global dedupe file system and a backup self-heal. So when you back it up, you don't have to care about fulls or anything. In fact, how Boost works is we never have to do a full again because we're protecting and we're guaranteeing the recovery of all the blocks.
Amazing. Thanks, Rick. I'm going to try to unmute Andrea again. I think she said her mic is working.
Sorry, just for Andrea starts. And for recovery, it depends what gets corrupted. If your whole system is down, you need a full recovery. And if it's just one or two files, we could just restore those files. You don't need the whole full in your as a recovery. Sorry, Andrea?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Perfect, yes.
Yep.
Excellent. Sorry, I had my system turned off before. Thanks, Rick. That was really, I didn't know that Dell was doing such cool stuff. So I'm really excited to hear about all of this. I'm just wondering with recovery services, with backup services, thinking about the complexity and the costs that you're describing, I'm wondering if most of your customers, your clients are enterprise, or if you work sort of in the small to medium business realm as well.
Yes, we for Canada itself, I myself work in the enterprise, so I work with the largest banks, with all the big logos out there that you see. My counterparts work with the SMBs as well. So we do have appliances to start from multiple terabytes, cloud-based offerings, to something super big as well that goes into multi-petabyte, exabyte scale.
Cool, thanks.
All right, throwing it back to the chat. What are the metrics that businesses care about to measure the effectiveness of backups?
So the metrics are my system safe? So a dashboard showing backed up, and having that green consistency throughout. That is number one. They pay for this to know, it's almost like insurance. They pay for it and they want to make sure they're covered. So every day you show them you're covered, you're covered, you're covered. That is really number one, what they're looking for. Then number two, when they have to restore, and only when they restore, I think out of 10,000 systems, we get one restore a day for 10,000. on that average. And obviously the time to restore, the ability to make sure that the data is restorable. I think a lot of our customers that use some other products out there that don't have this self-healing mechanism, they go, oh, it's not restoring. We have to restart from another backup. Hopefully that one works. And that is probably the worst news you have to tell a customer when they are trying to restore a system.
Great, thanks, Rick. Next question, are there any self-healing mechanisms in data storage?
Our storage system obviously has the self-healing. A lot of people create a dedupe database and they back up the database like 3 or 4 times a day because obviously you need one of those blocks is very important. Some of the other technologies that are starting up are trying to sort of use a Google scale out approach. And what they do is instead of creating a data, well, they do have a database, but they create 3 or 4 copies of it across their grid. So they can scale out, they just add more storage nodes and it just scales out and copies more. So I have 5 copies of it, so that's going to be safe. And that's their engineering principle. It's called error correction.
Great, thanks, Rick. Karen, go ahead and I'm going to unmute you. That works.
Hello again. I wanted to ask about one of the comments that you made early on. You had said like 8% of companies that pay recover their data. Like what happens? Like they don't get their data or they pay and then they don't get all of it or what?
Yes. They don't hear back. They don't, it's actually a study done by Sophos, S-O-P-H-O-S. So if you Google it, you can actually, it's pretty recent. I think it came out in the last day or 2 or a couple of days. But yeah, they did a whole analysis of that. They found that after people do pay, and sometimes they pay like the $780K last year or something, and they go, okay, well, here's the encryption key. And they realize that only recovers maybe 2 file servers out of the 14, or they don't even hear back. So it's one of the funniest emails I've seen that a customer sent me is when they got attacked is, we're doing this for charity. We're doing this for the goodness of mankind. So please pay us, 40 Bitcoins to this account or something like that. And, they talk about how their charity work. It's almost like, it was crazy when I was reading it and actually talk about how great they are and everything. It's like, these guys just encrypted my whole company. Well, they just sent me a note explaining how great of a person they are. So when the encryption key only gets part of the data, is that deliberate or you think they've just done something bad that it doesn't recover everything? Like they wouldn't do that on purpose, would they? Well, they're attacking you. It's okay. A lot of it is actually cyber terrorists at this point too. It's government hiring other government, hiring hacker teams to go disable an economy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the intent, they're not random high school kids sitting at home, there might be 1 or 2, but a lot of these people are doing it on purpose for some kind of political or financial gain.
Okay.
So the ransomware might split and actually encrypt sections differently, and they just happen to get one of the keys.
Yeah, so way back then, my home PC got encrypted because one of my kids actually went in and ran an Excel macro, and it creates a key. It auto random seeds a key with the RSA public, all that good stuff. So it left the key in a hidden directory, and I was able to get my data back. But a lot of the newer keys are using entropy, which is random data generated by the systems, which means that if it hits system 1, system 2, they're separate keys.
Good point. Thank you.
All right, Karen, sorry, did that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me how all this stuff works. I mean, scary and interesting.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and unmute Dean. Dean, go ahead.
Hi, Rick. So with the rising complexity of these systems, like your global DDoS and DIA pieces, are you finding that humans are being further and further removed from the operational aspects of these systems? Do you understand what I mean?
Yes. So there's a lot of, when I talk to CIOs across Canada, one of the biggest things is how much do I apply AI into automating a task and keeping someone around. So the human ability to recognize and see behavior, it's not going to be something AI is going to be able to do for the next 10 years, at least. AI is really here to complement and to make us do things faster. So think about, the Iron Man hand that allows you to lift many tons. You're still going to have the human brain to be able to control all this, and also the overrides. So the big thing is to have a human presence to be able to hit the emergency button when stuff isn't going well. Think about a driverless car or something like that. There has to be stuff to control the AI technologies out there to make it meet up to our standards. So think about an AI algorithm that goes into hiring people. And it starts using AI ML and doing a lot of assessments, but it finds that it hires middle-aged Asian people, okay, as the priority. Well, there's a lot of racial and prejudice applied in that algorithm by an AI algorithm. So there has to be a brain that comes in and says, well, this is not trending into where I like my company to be represented. So they have to tweak that algorithm to change that. So there's a lot of human intervention on AI, ML, and the backup sense. Yes, absolutely. A lot of this can be automated by going through hundreds of millions of bytes in seconds versus having a person go through logs line by line. The human error, all that stuff is not going to work. So having AI, ML do that, and then giving the decision to a person to go interact and fix is probably where we're still going to have a big job, because that ability and awareness of multi-factor impacts, it's not going to be something that they could put a program in place to do that.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Andrea, I see your hand up. I'm not sure if that was from your previous question or if you have another question.
It's old. I will get rid of it.
Okay. Sahir, go ahead.
Hi, Sahir.
Hi, Rick. Thank you. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
No? Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you for this presentation, and thank you for recommending Sheltered Harbor as well. That sounds awesome. I want to check that out. And this is a more general question in regards to your career. I did take a look at your LinkedIn as well, and it seemed like you started more from like a network administrator role, and then you built up since then. And I was wondering what drew you in particular to, I guess, EMC, and what drew you to this particular area of products and technologies that you're working with?
So there's working for an organization, working for yourself, and then working for a company that creates products. Okay, so there's those three principles you want to look at. When you work for a company, you're helping deliver services to end customers, like a bank, out-of-bank clients. For us, I do a lot of technologies that go and help solve problems for organizations so they can continue serving their clients. So for me, I love jumping into lots of different products. I love talking to a lot of people. I love doing stuff like this. And it just goes with my nature of helping others. So this allows me to really expand that, and it's a natural fit for me. And plus, when you're in a company that does really crazy stuff, it helps quite a lot too.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been overwhelmed at the moment with how awesome so many different areas of cyber are.
Yes.
So thank you. Like, that framework is helpful to think about.
Awesome.
Okay, we have another question in the chat. If cyber warfare is present in our country, then what is a short-term strategy you would recommend to the government or cybersecurity to enforce into the economy's infrastructure to protect?
So,
sorry.
Yep.
As it's known that if the malware is inside, then it's too late for the attacked organization.
Okay, so the government itself, I cannot talk about that. Obviously, there's a lot special privilege we have to go through to be able to even talk about their solutions, and it's not something I could do, especially on a recorded call on the internet. For governments, what they could do for organizations is create these standards and best practices, which is one of the screenshots I showed you in the US. So Canada has its equivalent standards out there. They're not as up to speed as the US because the US obviously gets hit first, but the hackers realize that, and now they're really redirecting a lot of that to other countries as well. So really, governments do a lot of education. Don't think that companies are sitting there going, twiddling their thumbs and not knowing this. They are extremely aware of this. This is why you guys are in these types of courses, because they're hiring a lot of more resources like yourselves to come in to complement a lot of the things they're already doing. There's a lot of stuff that they're doing to protect their environments, creating hot and cold sites, pilot sites, all kinds of extra redundancy to be able to do this. In fact, a lot of the banks are actually talking about, if I ever get hit, maybe my brother bank, which I compete against, will be my bank, will take over all my accounts temporarily until I get back up and clean house. So there's a lot of these things that are happening that you might not be aware of, but this redundancy of using another organization that I compete with as my supply chain or my service offering until I can get back up to speed.
Great, thank you, Rick. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, I see one here. What about the job opportunities available? Are they related to cybersecurity or data analytics or security forensics?
So job opportunities on everything you listed, yes, yes, yes. It's really exploding. Like there's no shortage of IT jobs right now. Figure out what interests you, because if that math mindset isn't for you, probably not something you want to do. Really figure out, what your interests are, what excites you. For me, you can see passion when I talk, and obviously this is something I love to do. For yourselves, find that stuff that really excites you, because you're going to have to be doing it day in, day out. And if it doesn't excite you, it's going to be a job, not a career. Great, folks. Feel free to reach out, connect if you want to. And if there's anything I can help you with, just drop me a line. I do get fairly busy on lots of things, so there might be delays. Just let me know that, how we met, if we met on this Ryerson presentation. Make sure you just mention that so I know I have some context of who you are.
Great, thanks, Rick. And thank you everyone for all of your questions. It's been a really great dialogue. And we hope you found value in today's session and in the Q&A session. And again, Rick, thank you for joining us tonight and organizing this with us for our students and our alumni. I'm sure everyone found it very informative, and there's some great key insights they'll be taking away. And I hope you all have a great evening before we wrap up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to do this. It was great meeting all of you.
Thanks, everyone.